Well, good morning, everybody. Happy Valentine's Day to you all. Kind of a snowy one here in Salem this morning. So, yeah, I've entitled this one Same Sex Marriage with two question marks after the end of it. I thought that might catch your attention. I don't know how many people even listen to these introductions for the week that I do, but I thought that one might catch your attention. What what I'm referring to are some files that I have on Populi for this course that I didn't realize until just recently that I probably needed to make some explanation of. So before this course, the major assignment that I had for students was to evaluate counter arguments for a particular issue that that were really essential to the New Testament theology and whatnot. Uh, so um, so that was the assignment for quite a few years that I did this. Um, so, for example, on the gender issue, there's a file that says gender issues. What I did there was to I submitted a couple of papers that I have written over the years and edited that have to do with my move away from complementarianism to more of an egalitarian view of women in the home and also in the church ministry. But then you'll also find a article by Douglas Moo that I think is one of the best arguments for complementarianism. And so, yeah, if you want to argue for complementarianism from the New Testament, I would recommend that article because to me it's one of the best in setting forth the biblical position of it. So, but what I wanted students to do was to read all three of those articles, briefly summarize them, and give me their own take on it. What did they feel the strengths and weaknesses of the papers were, the arguments, and then their own position. So I did the same thing with same-sex marriage, and that evolved out of actually a class that I taught at the church I attend, where we did something similar. We took some debatable issues, and I wanted people in the class to be able to think critically instead of just emotionally about some of these relevant issues. And so what I did was I wrote two articles uh, on opposing sides of same-sex marriage. I had read a couple of books from a biblical perspective by Christians advocating for same-sex marriage. And so what I wanted to do is write a paper that I thought best set forth those arguments. And so that's the paper that is pro same-sex marriage. And then I wrote another one that argued for marriage between a man and a woman. And so those two articles were another one of these issues that I had students evaluate and give their opinions on. Um, there are others like that. There's a file on Romans 6 and 7. Romans 7 is kind of a debatable chapter having to do with Paul's struggle with sin. So is that as a believer or as an unbeliever? So I had students evaluate the two sides of that argument. Uh, so that's why those articles are there. So, you know, uh, um, yeah. So, yeah, if you come across my article for same-sex marriage, don't come to the conclusion that that's my position. So anyway, I felt like that needed some explanation. All right. So, and that leads me to say something about First Corinthians. Um, there's also an article there that I would recommend to you if you're interested in eschatology, and that is Paul's vision or Paul's view of the eschaton. So, if you're like me, and many of you are, you grew up in a dispensational premillennial setting theologically, which advocated for the rapture of the church coming imminently uh, without any signs, followed by a 7-year tribulation period. After that, a 1,000-year reign of Christ, and then the end. Uh, as we read about it in the book of Revelation, creation of the new heavens and new earth, all of that. All right. So what I did, largely, I think, because of what I read in 1 Corinthians 15, and that's the connection for last week's reading in 1 Corinthians 15, that it sure seems like, and I know this is somewhat of an argument from silence, because Paul doesn't ever talk about a 7-year tribulation or a millennium. Doesn't mean he didn't believe it. But it seems to me that Paul's view of the eschaton is much simpler. And it's a view that I'm more comfortable with now than I was with, than I am with the dispensational premillennial view. So anyway, that article is there that I wrote, and you'd be, I mean, if you're interested in reading it, go ahead and read it. But again, that was largely, I mean, I deal with other passages besides 1 Corinthians 15, but that was the passage that really got me thinking about Paul's view of the eschaton being more of an amillennial eschatology than premillennial. Okay, well, we're headed into 2 Corinthians, and one of the things to look for there, and we see it in 1 Corinthians as well, is Paul's view of himself as a minister. And these two epistles, especially 2 Corinthians, are unique in that Paul, just by nature of the fact that he needs to defend himself against accusations by the Corinthians about himself personally, his ministry, he opens up for us really some insights into what motivates him, and particularly his sense of dependence upon the Lord, his weakness. That strength and weakness is a major theme of 2 Corinthians. The humble view that he has of himself, it's extraordinary. And I've been a student and thinking about Paul for decades, and these texts just always amaze me when I think of who Paul was, and how and why he was so greatly used of the Lord. All right, so that's all for this morning, and hope you have a good rest of the week as you settle into 2 Corinthians and continue our journey together. So thank you.